This week on the awareness angle, data breaches are everywhere, a credit check firm exposing millions of people, a pharma company hit by ransomware, customer data leaking through misconfigurations, and an insider keeping access long after they left the job. We have software updates being abused to push malware, governments accusing Russia of cyber attacks on air traffic control, and the US floating plans that could see travellers handing over years of social media just to get through the border. Oh, and millions upon millions of LG smart TVs may now have Microsoft Copilot quietly installed, whether you like it or not. All of that and more on this week's awareness angle. And I'm on my own this week because Luke's on holiday. So I hope you're having a great time, Luke. And I'm going to get straight into it. Right, kicking off with this week's Breach Watch. Coupang. We spoke about South Korean e-commerce giant Coupang probably a couple of weeks ago now. They've confirmed that a data breach that they had was caused by a former employee who still had access to internal systems after leaving the company. The individual alleged they allegedly used retained credentials to access customer data, highlighting what is essentially a failure in offboarding controls rather than a sophisticated attack. Coupang stated that the financial information was not exposed, but personal data was accessed. I mean, this is insider risk 101, isn't it? It's a classic scenario where the process has broken down. This isn't hacking skills. It's a broken process that's created this problem. Forgotten accounts and poor access are major issues with that, and you've got to watch how your levers are managed. You know, when someone leaves the company, they absolutely should not retain access to your systems. I read somewhere that the impact of this is huge. Like, the amount of people impacted within career is incredible. So the breach occurred in June this year, but it was only discovered in November. And then they launched an internal investigation. December the 6th, Coupang published an update on the incident that assured its customers that the stolen information had not been leaked anywhere. The company's CEO, Park Dae-jun, announced his resignation on Wednesday just gone and has apologised to the public for failing to stop what is the country's worst cybersecurity breach in history. Police have continued their investigations for a second day, and they've uncovered that the suspect is the 43-year-old Chinese national who was formerly employed by the retail company. So it's a big one. Control how you handle your levers. Make sure their access is terminated everywhere and that they don't have access to anything anymore. And this isn't, this is malicious insider risk, okay? But most insider risk isn't malicious. But this is a good example of why it's important. Right, moving on to the next story tonight. Credit check company breach exposes 5.6 million people. Another massive one. So a breach has hit 700 Credit, which is a US-based credit checking and identification verification company used by car dealerships. Around 5.6 million people have had their personal data exposed after unauthorized access to the company's 700 dealer platform. The data includes names, addresses, dates of birth, and social security numbers, all collected when people applied for vehicle finance. So this incident ran for several months before being discovered, as most do. And while there's no confirmed fraud yet, the type of data involved does create long-term identity theft risk. So 700 Credit said its core systems were not breached and affected individuals are being notified and offered credit monitoring, as we always do. It's good time to be a credit monitoring business, and your corporate referrals will be quite high. And this is a good example because these people, I'm guessing, may not even have been successful in their application for finance. Let's see if I can see anything on here. So they've blamed it. There's an actual notice from 700 Credit on their website. So they filed a breach notice on the 12th of December. 700 Credit files a consolidated breach notice with the FTC on behalf of dealer clients. On the 4th of December, Ken Hill interviews with Jim Fitzpatrick to explain how the data breach occurred and the next steps for dealers. 8th of December, Adam Crowell, Vice President of Legal and Compliance, discussed what dealers need to know. Then they did a webinar. So there's been a news interview. This is all on their website as well. Let me just show this, because this is, if you're watching on YouTube, you can, of course, get every episode on YouTube. Let me just share this. This is quite an interesting, it's a lovely way of doing it, actually. It's been very, we've talked about many an incident on this podcast, and many of them haven't been this transparent or open. So, it starts with a NADA article, and there's the NADA compliance alert. Yep, so that's fine. CBT News interview. So that links to CBT News, and there's an interview talking about what they need to know, which is really good. We go back to this KPA webinar. So now you can go to a webinar. You have to register. Well, that's it. Ugh. Surely that's a massive fail. To watch the webinar about the data breach, you need to submit some data. God's sake. Why have they put that behind a wall? That's hilarious. Oh, that's, there you go. Brilliant. So maybe don't do that, because you just got to give away more data to a random company that may get breached in the future. There's another webinar here, comply or register to watch recording. Oh, I was saying they'd done so well, but really. So to actually get up to date with this data breach, I need to expose my data to 2 more companies. Oh, but there's a video update from 700 Credit. I need to join Vimeo to watch the video. For God's sake, man, this is dreadful. Okay. So, really, like, your efforts are, I compliment your efforts, but the delivery is lacking. So, look, I don't want to find any more out about that, because they nearly did so well, but they really haven't thought that through. I wonder if there's been anyone. I wonder if anyone from a cyber team, anyone that's thought about this from a user perspective, and indeed, I'm going to share this excerpt we're going to share on social media. Maybe someone from 700 Credit will see this and remove these walls. Be fully transparent and don't require sign up. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, 700 Credit. The worrying thing about 700 Credit is I'm guessing, so this here, it says, in my notes, I've got, you can be breached by companies you've never heard of. Third-party data risk is everywhere. Of course it is. Okay. You can't change identity data. So this data's out there, right? So if you've been impacted in this, you'll get the credit monitoring. Keep an eye on your credit for applications and stuff, because the data includes names, addresses, dates of birth, and social security numbers, all collected when people applied for finance. You may not have had finance, but you might have applied for finance at some point. So, yeah. But not great, 700 Credit. It looked really positive, but then when you dig a little deeper, I've just got to expose more data. It's ridiculous. Right. Let's move on to the next story. Next up tonight, Petco shuts down Vetco website after exposing customer data. So Petco temporarily took down its Vetco veterinary services website because they discovered that customer personal information was publicly accessible. So the exposure wasn't a result of a cyber attack, but it was a misconfiguration that left sensitive data visible. Petco have acted quickly once it was identified, but it shouldn't have happened in the first place. So there's concerns about the security testing on this. Not every... It's a cybersecurity incident, right? I mean, it's not a malicious cyber attack. It's a misconfiguration. But there's been a data breach, essentially, or data has been exposed, let's say. So, these things can happen from simple mistakes. And I'm not saying this has been malicious at all. It's just a mistake, right? But it's important that we test some more. And continuously, these things need checking. So especially when it's health and contact data. So I don't know if there's any more details on this. I'm getting this from PetCrunch. I'm getting this from TechCrunch, not VetCrunch or PetCrunch. So what information? Customer records seen by TechCrunch include summaries of visits, medical histories, and prescription and vaccination records. They also contained customer names, home addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, the location of the clinics and services were performed, medical assessments, tests, diagnoses, the costs, goods, names of veterinarians, consent forms, owner signatures, and dates of service. We also found animal names, species and breed, sex, age. Everything someone needs to call you and socially engineer you. Oh, hi, I'm calling from this vet. I am the assistant to name a veterinarian. I'm calling about your golden retriever called Fluffy. I know Fluffy was last in here 3 months ago for vaccinations, but unfortunately we need some more. Yeah, it goes on. Like, there's a story with all of this. This is all the pieces of the puzzle you need to craft a really interesting story. Social engineering, God, there's so much. It's so many ingredients. You could cook a great story. So, yes, the interesting thing with this, and TechCrunch say, by TechCrunch's count, this is Petco's third data breach in 2025. So, scattered lapsus spiders, and I'm sure we've talked about them before on this show, on this podcast. Scattered lapsus hunters, which is the collective of scattered spider, lapsus, and shiny hunters. So they allegedly stole reams of data from a database of customer information related to Salesforce. And they were involved in the Salesforce. September, there was a second data breach involving a security issue that the company said it had discovered on its own. Petco blamed the data leak on a setting within one of our software applications that inadvertently allowed certain files to be accessible online, but didn't provide any more details. So they've left some data public, I would imagine. There is no details on this either. And then obviously now there's this one. So look, if Petco have any of your details, any of your pet's details, if you've seen a Vetco veterinarian, then just be really careful, because there's some data out there that could be used to craft a really interesting story for you. Right, moving on to the next breach watch this week. Pharmaceutical research firm Inotiv disclosed a data breach involving a ransomware attack that had encrypted parts of its network. The attackers have accessed and exfiltrated data before deploying ransomware. So they've come in, seen the data, got the data out, and then locked up behind them. So it's a double extortion tactic, essentially. There's a data breach, and then there's ransomware. Pay to get your data back and pay to get your systems back. Inotiv, Inotiv, confirmed that personal data and sensitive information was involved and have begun notifying individuals. This highlights how ransomware is not just about system disruption. Data theft is now essentially a huge part of the business model in cybercrime. And, you've got the whole legal, reputational, ethical consequences. And pharma's not exempt from this, right? Pharmaceuticals, massive industry. Lots of money flying around typically, and controversial in some cases. So it's and this is important. I mean, is there any details here of how it happened? I haven't. Let me just check the actual article for more. So it's Keelin. So there's a Keelin of Quilin, which we've spoken about before. They've claimed responsibility for the breach. Posted it on their leak site, along with 176. They say they've exfiltrated 162,000 files, totaling 176 gigabytes which is huge. You might recognise Keeling, because Keeling have done Australian Court Services Victoria, and they did Synovis here in the UK, so they really don't care. Synovis were the pathological services to the NHS, the health service here in the UK, that actually resulted in that cyber attack was actually traced back to a patient's death. So they don't care. And that attack they did on Synovis resulted in hundreds of appointments and operations being cancelled on very sick people here in the UK. So, yes. Inotiv. So there we go. Okay, that's this week's Breach Watch. Right, let's move on this week to What the Hack. This week we'll start off, we've got a couple of quick ones and then some more interesting ones. There's some good stories this week. I quite like the stack. It's a shame Luke's not here because I quite like the stories. It would have been good to get into them a bit more. Apple have issued an emergency security update after 2 zero-day exploits. So Apple have released urgent patches for iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, watchOS, visionOS, and Safari. Safari, they should have called Safari like BrowserOS or something, and then made Safari an operating system for web-based devices, because then it would have fitted. So yeah, iOS, iPadOS, all Apple devices, essentially. So these patches will fix 2 zero-day vulnerabilities that were being exploited in the wild before the fixes were available. And these affect the browser engine used by the Safari browser and all web browsers on Apple devices. One issue, CVE 2025-43529, is a use after free bug that could let attackers run arbitrary code by having users load crafted web content. The second is a memory corruption flaw, which was also patched in Google Chrome this week. Because obviously last week was Patch Tuesday, and there was some Chrome updates as well. Loads of patches in Windows, which not everyone will get, but we spoke about that last week, I think. So yes, if you have Apple devices, any Apple devices that are still supported, update them, get them updated, please. And it's normally pretty good. Apple devices are normally good updating very efficiently, so it's not much of an issue there, I don't think. If you have out of support Apple devices, this is 2 more. If you have old iPads, kids using old iPads, this is 2 more reasons why it's probably worth retiring them, or thinking about how they're used. Like YouTube may be okay, but Safari, web browsers, probably not. And if you want to know what 0 day is, because I mentioned 0 days, then think back and think some people here, some people listening may not be aware of what 0 day is. ChatGPT, what is a 0 day? A 0 day is a security vulnerability that the software vendor does not yet know about, or has only just discovered and has had 0 days to fix. This matters because it can be exploited before a patch exists. So that's essentially it. So attackers find it first and then use it, and then obviously the defenders are playing catch up until it can be patched. That's essentially a 0 day. Right, let me just grab a drink. Right, moving on to the next in What the Hack. Notepad++ have fixed a flaw that lets attackers push malicious updates. Notepad++ is widely used. It's essentially just a Notepad document, a bit like Notepad or a bit like Notes on your iPhone. But it's got loads of features and it's open source, so it's, free and stuff. Notepad have released version 8.8.9, which addresses a serious security flaw that allowed attackers to distribute malicious run files, executables, instead of legitimate update files. So this was first spotted when users reported that the updater launched an unexpected program that gathered system information and uploaded it to a remote host. So this behavior obviously didn't match Notepad++'s normal operations. Security analysis showed that the updater did not properly verify the digital signatures of update files. So the updater that comes with Notepad++ didn't correctly verify digital signatures of update files, which meant that if an attacker could intercept or manipulate update traffic, they could trick systems into installing a fake update or rogue code. And this is quite common. This is a technique that's been about for years and years and years. So version 8.8.9 of Notepad++ release, it now enforces signature and certificate checks and aborts updates that fail validation, as it should. So users are urged to upgrade immediately. There are some reports that this has already been used in targeted campaigns, with some organisations in East Asia noticing suspicious activity after Notepad++ processes appeared as an initial entry point. So look, we talk about updating software. This is where it gets really difficult, doesn't it? Because we just previously spoke about the importance of Apple and security updates. And then here's where Notepad++ becomes an issue, potentially, which is annoying. If we read the article in Bleeping Computer, they've interviewed, or they quote Kevin Beaumont, who said earlier this month, security expert Kevin Beaumont warned that he heard from 3 organisations that were impacted by security incidents linked to Notepad++. I've heard from 3 orgs now who've had security incidents on boxes with Notepad++ installed, where it appears Notepad++ processes have spawned the initial access. The researcher said that all organisations he spoke to have interests in East Asia, and then it appeared very targeted. So there's a deeper dive and technical explanation on the Bleeping Computer article. Obviously, that's available in our newsletter that comes out every week alongside every episode. You can get it on LinkedIn by searching for the awareness angle, or you can get it in your inbox on email, which we did retire, but we've brought back due to popular demand. So if you want to get it in your inbox every Monday morning, get yourself to www.riskycreative.com and you can sign up there right on the homepage. The article from Kevin Beaumont's interesting because he says, interesting one has been rumbling around for about a week in my circles. I've heard from 3 orgs now. So read that. I'll put a link to, I'll definitely put a link to the Bleeping Computer one. And if I remember, I'll also put a link to the article by Kevin Beaumont as well. That's quite an interesting one. Right. Moving on with the next story. And this one infuriates me greatly because LG. Okay. It used to be. So family, friends and me, I have an LG TV. And it's a few years old, but it's still perfectly fine. I was almost bought a new one during Black Friday. The timing of this story, Black Friday. I've had Samsung TVs in the past, and after 2, 3, 4 years, the apps slowly stop working. Definitely, I've heard people go, oh, my Samsung TV is 8 years old and all the apps work. Yes, if it's like a really expensive one. But if it's a cheaper, lower end TV, 500, 600, 800 pounds, that might not be the case. Definitely my experience with Samsung and my in-laws with their Samsung TV that I encouraged them to buy a few years ago that none of the apps now will work on. Well, my go-to is always LG. It's great. Support the apps for ages. Keep giving updates, software updates for all of your apps, all your iPlayer and your Netflix, which is brilliant. Like, great. I think I need to look for a new TV brand. LG Update installs unremovable Microsoft Copilot on smart TVs. Just, there's nothing good about that headline. So a recent over-the-air firmware update from LG has silently installed Microsoft Copilot, obviously the Microsoft AI assistant. This has gone out on a range of smart LG TVs with no option to uninstall it. It's not probably is someone's going to go, yeah, you can, because you can like edit. It's not easy and obvious, and it doesn't uninstall in a typical way. Now, obviously, this has triggered a strong backlash from users. Users report the Copilot entry appears on TV apps or home interface as a non-removable system component, which means the only choice is to hide it rather than delete it. So this has come through LG's standard firmware update channel. And Reddit and tech forums have obviously shown frustration about a loss of control and privacy and bloatware. There's another note on this. So this fits a broader pattern of LG adding advertising and third-party services into WebOS. So one of the parts I saw about this was that they're now gathering, like by default, gathering a load more data about the programs you watch and the activity you perform on your TV that's on by default before you turn it off. So let's have a look here. Historical context from, I'm looking at an article here from, well, who's the article from? I'm saying I'm looking at an article from webpronews.com. And they've linked through to an old Reddit post. LG smart TVs have started displaying ads when idle. And this is a year-old article from The Verge. LG smart TVs have started displaying full-screen ads before the conventional screensaver kicks in. Ugh. The feature will advertise both LG's own products, with Flat Panels HD reporting it saw a muted ad for the LG channel streaming service, and those from third parties. So there's a picture here of a car being advertised. It's yes, that's not good. The other concern with this, and this is a concern we had years ago now, and I'm thinking like before COVID, so around 2018, the company I worked for moved offices, and they had some, old office space refurbed and moved into it, and was like, oh, it's brilliant. And every TV they had a Ethernet cable plugged in. It was connected wired to the internet. And every LG, I think they were LG TV, they had voice services. So you could trigger it with a voice command. And this was right at the birth of Google Home and Amazon Alexa. So there was lots of concerns then about microphones always being on and people listening. And these were in meeting rooms, okay, where there was confidential chats and strategical conversations going ahead. So it was like, disconnect every TV. Doesn't need to be connected to the internet. Not in that scenario. They'd done it by default, thinking it was an awesome thing. But it didn't need to be done because people plugged in an HDMI cable or there was a control box in the middle of the screen. And everything was done through a Google Meet third-party box rather than the TV directly. So the problem with this story with LG here, like getting back to this, is, and this is a pattern we're seeing everywhere, data is king, right? It's data is valuable. And this is the same argument with connected cars. This is why, like, some car companies, it's still possible to buy like a brand new electric car that doesn't support Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and that's by choice. Brands that don't support Android Auto. So I think we spoke about this on this show ages ago. General Motors are ditching Apple CarPlay and Android Auto on all of their cars. So they're dropping support for phone projection on all new vehicles in the near future. And this is according to General Motors Mary Barra. And the reason for this, right, is because, and it's the same with LG, all your browsing data is valuable to advertisers and to people. This is why products like Google are free, because you are the customer. If the product is free, you are the customer. And these car companies have realised, and TV companies now, obviously, have realised that data is valuable. So the car companies don't want you using Apple or Android Auto because they can't see what happens within that ecosystem. They can't see where you're driving to. They can't see what you're listening to. They can't get stuff about your, there's stuff they can't get really in as much detail. They can't get the conversations you're having with your assistant. If you operate purely within the car ecosystem, then they have all of that kind of information about you. So, and it's probably the same with the TVs, right? They want to gather all the information of what you're doing because then they can sell that to Netflix. Would love to know what every LG TV watches, I'm sure. And it's the same with others. So it doesn't surprise me that this is happening. Behind the scenes, so the article in WebPro News says, behind the scenes, LG's partnership with Microsoft fits into a larger strategy of ecosystem expansion. So LG has openly discussed plans to integrate more AI and subscription services across its appliances. This includes WebOS updates that enhance news access and browser functionalities, leveraging Copilot for smarter content recommendations. So this is a two-way thing. Non-deletable nature of the app suggests a deliberate design choice to ensure user engagement or at least exposure to Microsoft's AI suite. I wonder how much Microsoft paid for that. Obviously, LG are going to benefit from there being some AI there, but I do wonder why that's not ChatGPT or someone else. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that. If you if you support people, like LG TVs, just permissions, check the permissions. If you're messaging out to people, get them to check their permissions, the usage data, go into the terms and conditions, go into the settings, and just check who you're sharing your information with. I don't think this is a problem you can run away from either, because I can imagine Samsung gathering data. Hisense are probably going to bring something in. Other manufacturers are probably going to bring stuff in with this. You know, it's I think the choice of companies to buy tellies from that don't do this is probably going to reduce. But it's something you need to be aware of and check your settings, see if there's a way to turn it off. And then question whether or not your TV really needs to be connected to the internet. Like, maybe we'll see a rising of dumb TVs, because I don't use smarts on the TV really. I use a separate box, here in the UK it's a Virgin media box. It's a Virgin get all my data. But you know what I mean, like maybe we'll start seeing 55, 60, 80-inch monitors rather than TVs, because the date of it, you know what I'm saying. Right, move on to the next story. The next story tonight is Germany accuses Russia of air traffic control, cyber attack, and election interference. This is an article from BBC. And it's actually a really short article in the BBC, which surprises me, because this sounds like a really big deal. But Germany has accused Russia of a cyber attack on its air traffic control and attempted electoral interference. And they've summoned the Russian ambassador. Do you see what I mean? That's like the beginnings of, like the opening scene of a Hollywood movie. So the foreign ministry spokesman said Russian military intelligence was behind a cyber attack against air traffic control in August 2024. The spokesman also accused Russia of seeking to influence and destabilise the federal election in February this year. And this obviously comes at a heightened concern in Europe over suspected Russian cyber attacks, obviously after the special military operation invasion of Ukraine. German officials say the cyber attack can be attributed to Fancy Bear, linked to the GRU, although the confirmed flights were not disrupted, and the attack was limited to office communications. I mean, it's not great, is it? And this is, well, it's scary. Just everyone leave everyone alone. Not that that's going to end any wars, but God, just leave everyone alone. I'm not going to go into more details of that because I don't want to get all political, but links to the story will be in the newsletter, so you can subscribe to the newsletter and find out more. That's all the news stories I had this week. I'm a Lone Ranger this week, so if you wanted more news, there'll be more next week because Luke will be back. But let's get into the topics. So I have some interesting topics this week, and this might take a little while. I've got 3 interesting topics, and I've got one from Luke that Luke sent me. So, this first one is a really, really quick one. And the comments are interesting and funny, but this raises a good point. So this is on Reddit, and this is from r/comedy heaven. Okay. And this, the title on this is purely just Pringle. And we can see here, let me just hide that. There we go. This is a Google warning, compromised password. So you get this on browser, you get this on Google app on Android and iPhone. This is Google saying, change these passwords now. Some of your saved passwords were exposed in a non-Google data breach. You should change them now. This account is at risk. Pringles.com. So people are joking about why would you have a Pringles.com account? And the comments read things like, watch out, they're going to steal your personal data. Favorite chip flavor. Because I reused password, my Pringle account got breached and my vast ideas of chip flavors was sold on the dark web. As a result, Doritos is now selling twisted queso chips, but I wanted my daily audio log of chip flavors only to go to Pringles personally. This is no laughing matter. It's a crunching matter. Someone says, why in the hell would you ever need a Pringles account? And then someone posts, which looks like, is this actual copy? Let me just check that this isn't sarcasm. I don't know if this is sarcasm, so let's take it with a pinch of salt. But the fact is, right, and what I'm saying is essentially it says premium discounts on favourite flavours, invitations to exclusive Pringle events such as Factory Tour and Potato Roll, access to the Pring Prong social network where you can post chip facts. That's got to be fake, hasn't it? There's no Pring Prong social network. Pring Pong? There's no Pring Pong. This is fake. Probably an AI response. So look, it's a really important fact. There's one here. Don't forget, kids, always use strong passwords for your most important accounts. A strong password should be made up of at least 15 characters, including lowercase, uppercase numbers and special characters. 15 characters, yes. Let's not get into the password conversation. That's something for another day. But I think this is really important because we joke about a Pringles.com account and why would you need a Pringles.com account? But here's one example of the millions of accounts people have these days. It used to be once upon a time that the average user had about 80 accounts, and I think it's now like 240 or something. Let's just quickly ask, how many accounts online does a typical person have? Let's see what that comes back with. If you don't use a password manager, you are going to reuse passwords unless you're a genius. It's as simple as that. Recent breakdowns say many older adults now are juggling around 100 personal accounts. CureFrame says 168 personal accounts and 87 work passwords is typical, so more than 250. How do you remember 250 passwords in your head? Especially when some platforms will make you change them regularly, some won't. Some will make you have them over 15 characters, some will let you have 8 characters. It's just impossible. This is a great story for why a password manager is really, really important. And they don't have to be difficult. And they can be free. I'm using Bitwarden. I am not sponsored by Bitwarden. Bitwarden is free. It's awesome. It's really good. I was using NordPass as a basic premium user. Wasn't a lot of money. That was also good. And they're secure, right? LastPass, I haven't even covered that this week. I should have covered that. LastPass have just been fined in the UK. This is a separate news story. LastPass had a breach, right? A big breach. And but none of the passwords were exposed because they were all encrypted. So I wasn't really affected, other than people knowing I was a LastPass customer. I wasn't affected. LastPass have been fined 0.2 million by the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office here in the UK, following a breach from 2022. So yeah, I'll put a little link to that in the newsletter. Yes, but fundamentally, password managers are secure, okay? So if you don't use a password, a site like Pringles.com gets compromised. They will then use your email address and that password on every other service that they can access. So if I'd have reused that password across different services, eventually it would be tried on other services. So I might even have a Pringles.com account and just not remember, because I don't remember every single account I've signed up to. I've got no idea. No idea at all. I signed up to 3 or 4 last week for different things. So, yeah, just it's a good. It's funny that we have a Pringles.com account, but it's a good lesson about how important it is that we use a password manager. Right. Next up tonight, I want to show you a clip. This is something I saw on LinkedIn. And let me just share this here. This was brilliant. And I'm not familiar with the TV show, but this was shared by Harley Sugarman, who's founder and CEO at Anagram Security. Let me just get the volume on this and take it back to the beginning. This is a clip from a TV show called Elsbeth, okay, which is an American TV show, but this is right at the opening credits. What we've got someone in a uniform, looks like a police uniform, standing in front of a desk, and they're talking to someone who looks more senior to them, sat behind a desk. Okay, that's the scenario for those of you that are listening.
All department employees received an email containing a link to an unsecured website due to look like the NYPD's login page.
Yeah, I remember this email. Why won't they ever just let us use an old password?
I don't know, but it was a phishing test, and you handed over your credentials 2 minutes after the email went out.
Let me get this straight. You played a trick on me?
Not a trick. A cybersecurity stress test.
So it sounds like police entrapment to me.
Sir, I recognize you have some anxiety around technology.
No, I have some anxiety around whether or not my own people are looking to make a fool of me.
Sir, departments have lost millions of dollars to ransomware hackers using these methods. You put the department at risk.
Oh, no, I didn't. Because there were no real hackers. There was just you.
All you need to do is pass a simple, quick remedial retrieval.
Say remedial one more time to find out what happens.
There's a number of things I like about that. So these are conversations, obviously NYPD, it's like the captain or whatever, sat in front of them, who obviously isn't impressed with the fact that his team have tried to trick him and claims it's police entrapment. Well, that's like, in an organisation, if you run phishing simulations, people are going to feel like it's entrapment. So they obviously haven't done a very good at explaining why they do it to the captain. And then when they mention remedial training, say remedial to me one more time. It's like, yeah, those are conversations I can imagine people having. If anyone works in cybersecurity awareness, that's just a funny clip that I think is brilliant. So nice one, Harley, for that's going to appear at cybersecurity conferences and summits and stuff probably for the next 2 or 3 years. I think that's one to add into the bank, a little clip. So yes, thank you, Harley, for sharing. I thought that was brilliant. The next thing I want to talk to you, and I don't want to get deep into the pros and cons of this, right? But Roblox. I have children and they play Roblox. Now, I have children aged, my eldest is 13, my youngest is 5. Okay, so there's a big, wide arch of age groups there. And obviously, kids grow up quickly. My kids came across this game that they wanted to play. And they have been playing. The older ones have been playing. Okay. And I'm going to share this on the screen right now. This game is called Scary Shawarma Kiosk, The Anomaly. Okay. Maturity minimal. Ages 5+. There is no way on earth, if this was a movie, that this would be PG, whatever. This would be a 15, I think. Probably at least a 12. So the idea is, the job is simple. Keep the grill hot. Serve every day. Welcome to your first night shift at Shawarma 4. Oh, and one more thing. Try to stick to the rules if you want to make it through the night. You'll find them taped to the counter. Some of them might sound strange, but trust me, they're there for your own safety. And this is fine, okay? Like, it looks great. When we look at this game here, 89,000 active players, 269,000 people have favorited this. It's had 67.3 million visits. Okay, and it was only created in August this year. August this year. Maturity, minimal, ages 5+. Fear, occasional mild. Violence, occasional mild. Okay, so that's nice. Content maturity labels. Let's look at the content maturity labels for Roblox. Mild, may contain repeated mild violence. Heavy, unrealistic blood. Mild, crude humour. And repeated mild fear. No, it said minimal. Maturity minimal. May contain occasional mild violence, light unrealistic blood, and or occasional mild fear. There is no way that this game should be that rating at all. Because we just look at some of the screenshots. Don't trust anyone. Cameras will help you identify them. Look at that. That person's got no face. How is that 5+? That person's got just a big hole where their face should be. And they're close. Look. Come on now. I know this is a cybersecurity podcast. There's also some blatant brand rip-off there. That's a McDonald's M, if ever I saw one, just upside down for a W in shawarma. Maybe that's what a shawarma restaurant looks like in Turkey or somewhere. I don't know. So, like, even the icon here, this face top right, it's we've got like people with their heads back and holes where their faces should be. This shouldn't be. Absolutely should not be 5+. Anyway, doing some digging on this, before we came to this episode, I signed in to Roblox on this computer because I have an account that I've played with my kids occasionally. And it asked me to do the captcha when I signed in. The Roblox captcha is incredible, right? So verifying you're not a bot, this is the captcha it gave me. Use the arrows to match the icon to the left. So I've got an icon on the left, which in this case is a thumb and a little finger with the other fingers collapsed. And then it says, match the icon on the left to the cup with the most liquid. So then there's a series of scrollable images on the right of cups, 3D image of cups from like looking down with different icons over the top. And you have to scroll through 9 different images until you find the one where your icon is over the one with the most fluid. And I was like, I had to do 5 of them. Wow. And then if we look at like another example of this, use the arrows to choose the image where the winner has the icon shown in the image on the left. And there we've got an image on the left, which is like a lamp, genie's lamp, in front of what looks like a stadium. And then on the right, you've got a picture of 3 runners running down a track, each with a different icon on their back. I was like, wow, that's, I was quite impressed with that. I thought that was really interesting, actually. And then I found out who makes these captchas. Arcos Labs, that was it. Just get these up. Because I just thought, here we go. Arcos Labs, Arcos Match Key. So this, we'd seen many of these before, like there's a picture of a hand pointing in a direction and you have to rotate the image. And there's different difficulties of these. Now, Roblox forums, people are complaining that they're too hard, but I think these are really, really interesting. Like there's no, and Adobe are using them. Why not just traditional capture? Most easily identified photos are already labeled by off-the-shelf machine learning-based solvers. Users have a bad association with difficult photo captures. Image recognition software continually improves image detection, which means these captures can be beaten easier. So they're more interactive, but they are, and you can try them here, but they are difficult. Use the arrows to rotate the asset in the face the same direction as the asset on the left image. It's Christmas, but I've got to make sure Santa's facing the same way as a bear I've got on the left. Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting. Arcos Match Key as a solution. So Roblox really, really bad for the game. I think that's dreadful. I've reported it. Nothing will happen because there's so many million active users. This is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so many games, horror games now that are part of the ether. You get emails from school like parents should be reminded that Five Nights at Freddy's is rated blah, blah, blah. But it's just part of the conversation now. It's like part of the ether. You're not going to get rid of it. Right. Lastly, let me share Luke's example here. So Luke shared me a TikTok video, as always. So let me just share this. This is from Aaron Parnas 1. Let me get this up here. Hang on. And this is slightly political, but if you ever travel to the United States for business or for work or for pleasure, this is of interest. And I'll play the video. You can listen to it. You don't need to visual it. It's just a talking head. I'll play the video, so we'll listen to the audio. And then I've got an article for some more information. So let me just share this here.
I have some big news right now. The Trump administration may soon require any foreign tourists coming to the United States of America to disclose 5 years of social media history. Yes, this is real. A new proposal put forth on the Federal Register by the Customs and Border Patrol, according to NBC News, plans to require all foreign tourists that are trying to enter the United States of America to provide mandatory new data to the United States. And it's regardless of whether or not they're coming in from countries that require visas. These include residents from the United Kingdom, Germany, and elsewhere. In addition to 5 years of your social media history, you're going to have to provide email addresses, telephone numbers in the last 5 years, the addresses and names of your family members. By the way, this is coming just months before, actually, before the World Cup next year, and then a couple years before the Olympics in 2 years. So it's setting the stage for everyone coming for the World Cup and the Olympics to have to provide all your social media data for the past 5 years and your addresses and family members and more. Now, the public has 60 days to comment on this proposal. So we'll see what happens. Spread the word. Follow along for all the news that you need to know about. There'll be much more to come soon.
There we go. So that's social media. So you'll need to give details of your social media accounts, details of your phone number, your email addresses you've had. Well, I say it's like my go-to phrase. It's interesting. I think it's quite scary. I've been to America. Luckily enough, I've had the opportunity to go to America this year and last year for cybersecurity summits. They've got the World Cup coming up and the Olympics on US soil in the next couple of years. So a lot of people will be traveling to that country. They'll be scooping up a lot of information about people. And I wonder what they're going to do with it. Like, if we say anything bad about the current administration or Donald Trump, not that we would, because why would we? They're doing great things. So it's interesting. Just something to be wary of, really. And you hear reports about travel being down in the United States and stuff like that. Especially from countries like Canada. Someone I know in Canada was telling me that tourism from Canada to the US has dropped. I've got an article here where it says the new proposal, which was published on Wednesday in the Federal Register, would apply to travellers from more than 36 countries that are part of the visa waiver program. People who submit their electronic system for travel authorization, or ESTA, if they want to visit the US, which is what we do here in the UK. So this includes countries with traditionally close ties to the US, such as Australia, France, Germany, Israel, Japan, and South Korea. The VWP, the Visa Waiver Program, was established to make it easier for citizens from these countries to travel to the United States because they're deemed as lower risk, right? We're deemed as friends, which means we can go there for tourism or business for 90 days without the need for a visa. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It really will. I'm not that I've got anything to hide, but it does make me uncomfortable a little. And I hope me saying that doesn't prevent me accessing the States next year if I go. But yeah, it does make me uncomfortable. Hey, that's everything we've got this week. That's the episode done and dusted. I've spoken for an hour all on my own, so I need to go and get a drink. Luke will be back next week, so if you prefer the conversation with the both of us, don't worry, normal service will be resumed. Thanks for listening, watching. Don't forget you can subscribe to the newsletter on LinkedIn. Just search for The Awareness Angle or me, and Davis. You can get everything on Instagram at Risky Creative, on YouTube at Risky Creative, on TikTok at InfoSecAnt, and you can get the newsletter in your inbox by subscribing at www.riskycreative.com. But for me, have a safe week, look after yourselves, and I'll see you again next week.